Hey guys, Boone down south. You just saw me shoot my Wicked Ridge M370 at 80 yards. Today, we're going to answer a question. How far should you shoot your crossbow? So stick around, hit that like and subscribe. Hey guys, thanks for watching my videos and supporting my channel. A lot of the comments I've seen recently, a lot of you guys have gotten new crossbows for Christmas. And a lot of you guys are getting into the sport of crossbow hunting, if you will. And so I just want to take a moment to kind of address this one issue. I get asked this question a lot when I start talking about crossbows, like how far can you shoot that thing, man? And there's the how far can I shoot, and there's the how far should I shoot. Now I'm talking hunting situations, of course. And what I'm going to give you is my opinion, and my opinion only. I'm sure others share this opinion or something similar to it. But again, you take that for what it's worth. It's a free video you watch on YouTube, so take it for what it's worth. But I've been shooting with a blade since I was 16 years old. And I've got a lot of experience through archery, compound bows, crossbows now. Shooting a blade is different than shooting a bullet, a lot different. And I kind of want to explain the scenarios that go around here with these crossbows, because a lot of the guys are seeing these crossbows and they get advertised to shoot, flat trajectories way out there. You're getting scopes now that basically let you dial from like 0 to 100 yards on these crossbow scopes. So, they're like, oh man, that just expands my range to shoot a deer. I'm back to like a rifle range, and let me get that crossbow. And I'm just gonna tell you, for most of you, let's put it this way, there's people that can shoot far distances at a game, 70 yards, 60 yards. That's probably the 3%, okay? That's probably the top 3%. For the rest of y'all like me, you shouldn't do it. And I know I'm gonna catch some flack of that. There are some people that can. You gotta know your limits. I wanna address some of these issues here and why I make that statement. I'm gonna address two questions actually. But can I shoot a crossbow that far? The answer to that is absolutely yes. You can shoot a crossbow out to 100 yards. You just saw me shoot at 80 yards at the beginning of this video. The technology in the crossbows these days, really good, consistent releases. We have good technology and the bolts that go into these things. They can fly and they can hit that target, okay? There's no doubt about it. Can you shoot it at 100 yards? Absolutely you can. But I'm talking in a controlled environment. I'm talking on a range. I'm talking in an open field. Let me explain something to you. So when I used to shoot compound bows, one of the things that I would always do is you push yourself, right? So I set up for a 20-yard shot, but that means I practiced 30 yards, I practiced the 40 yards, I practiced the 50 yards. And that makes me really good at that 20-yard shot. Same concept with his crossbow. Get out of that range and shoot at those 80-yard, 70-yard distances on a range, because it's really like shooting a rifle at that point. So you're practicing different mechanisms. You're practicing trigger control. You're practicing your breathing. You're practicing, just your release and your follow through once you pull that trigger. Those are the kind of things you need to practice. And the better your shot at 70 yards, 80 yards, you're gonna be dead on. It's gonna be a cakewalk at 20 yards. It's always amazed me when I shot my compound bow that I'd shoot at 40 yards and I'd shoot that like all day. And the next day I'd pull back at 20. I'm like, wow, that's child's play. It was like it was 5 yards. That's because you got so good and used to shooting at that distance. And so that's what I'd say, yeah, shoot it at that distance. Now, when it comes to hunting, this is where you guys need to understand something. It is not a rifle. And let me explain this about that, what I'm saying here. My 30-06, for example, I sighted an inch high at 50 yards. Now, if you think about your kill zone on a deer, let's just call it a 6-inch circle. And some people might say 8, whatever. Let's just call it a 6-inch circle. If I'm in the center of that circle, if I'm a half-inch high at 50 yards, it's dead, right? When I get out to 100 yards, it's still a little bit high. It's still dead. When I get out to 200 yards, it's dropped me down 2 inches. The animal's still dead, right? 0 to 200 yards on my 30-06, I can point it there. If I'm aiming at the center of that 6-inch target, I'm gonna hit it. There's a little bit of, and in general, I still don't shoot that far on my 30-06, I just don't. But, there's that, if you mess up on your trigger pull, if you tighten up your tense and you're off just a little bit, that rifle is way, way more forgiving, because there's only this much drop in 200 yards with a 30-06 bullet. That's it, at 200 yards. So 0 to 100, we're talking like here. That's your drop. Okay, once that bullet leaves the rifle, it's dropping. Gravity's pulling that bullet down, and over distance and time, it's dropping. The same thing happens with this bolt when you shoot it, except it's drastically different than the bullet. So what I'm saying, guys, when you're shooting that rifle, you got a drop of this much at 200 yards for say a 30-06. Okay, different bullets and all come into play and all that stuff, but you got a drop of somewhere like this, depending on what bullet and rifle combo you're shooting, how many grains a bullet is. So when an animal is 30 yards versus 35 yards, it's irrelevant, right? If it's 30 yards or 47 yards, totally irrelevant. That's why rangefinders are so important when it comes to shooting with a blade, archery, crossbows. So here's the thing, guys. You can go to a ballistic calculator for crossbows. Pull up, Google that. I can put a link down to some of them. You can check one out. You know, punch in the speed that your crossbow shoots. You know, so I just, for example, I use 400 feet per second. Okay, a lot of these crossbows come out 400, 415, whatever. 410 grain arrow. I put it in a chart. And what you're going to see, and again, we're talking, you know, maybe 3 inches in a 30-06 from 0 to 200 yards. Okay, this bolt between 20 and 30 yards, it's a 5-inch drop. 5-inch drop. If you're aiming at the center of a 6-inch hole and you're off by 10 yards, you just missed that hole. You just shot low. If you go from 30 to 40, you're now looking at an 8-inch drop. So you better be darn sure what your yardage is. From 40 to 50, you're looking at an 11-inch drop. When you go from 50 to 60 yards, you're looking at 14-inch drop between 40 and 50 yards. You better know, you know, where if that animal is 43 yards, 45 yards, you better know that's a big drop. You start going from 60 to 70 yards, you're talking about another 16-inch drop. That's another 16 inches between 60 and 70 yards. So again, you gotta know. You gotta know. That's huge. There's a wide range for, and I didn't even take this out to 100 yards, 80, 90, 100, because the drops get bigger, incrementally bigger between these distances. So you gotta know that exact yardage, and you better have your crossbow dialed in at that point. So when you look at that, guys, you know, that 30-06, 3-inch drop over 200 yards, we're talking a 59-inch drop with a 400 feet per second crossbow with a 410 grain bolt, all else being the same, a 59-inch drop at 70 yards. That's a 5-foot drop, just about. That's almost 60. That's a 5-foot drop. You got to remember this: when you're hunting, you're not hunting a static target at an exact known range. A lot of times, that, especially when that animal's moving, that animal is a fluid creature, right? Just an ear twitch, a head twitch, a muscle move, right? You could be zoned in. A lot of times, you might be on edge, shaking. You know, my first archery kill was 16 years old. I shot a hog on a public land in Florida, and I was shaking so bad the arrow was bouncing on the thing, but I hit the hog. But you don't know what kind of odds you're up against, right? Now, usually, you know, my deal with the shakes is, if it happens fast, I'm good. I make the shot, and then I just fall apart after that, and I'm just shaking right after the shot. But if it takes a while, that blood starts pumping, and I'm shaking, and, you know, you're dealing with all those kind of factors, you know. And you say, you know, I see, you know, plenty of deer, I don't get the shakes, and you may not. But the fact of the matter is that animal's moving, and especially maybe it's just grazing slowly, and you know, there's some time in between you ranging it and the time you getting your crossbow ready to shoot, right? And that animal's taking a couple steps. You know, if it's at 30 yards and went to 32, not that big of a deal. But if it's at 50 and went to 52, we've got a bit of a drop there with just those 2 yards. So I just kind of want you to get that. There's a big variance when you start pushing out those farther yardages that you got to know. And it's too easy. You might see an animal walking, and here comes a deer, and it's going in an angle. And you range it at 40, and you think it's kind of going straight, but it's going more of an angle, and you shoot, and by the time it was 50. And, you know, you made a bad shot on it, right? Or you just totally went under it, you know? So those kind of things are what happen. That's kind of my first argument for not shooting that far. So here's my second argument. Now, like I said, I started shooting compound bow when I was 16. Done that pretty much my whole life until I had to have surgeries on my 2 shoulders. I kind of switched over to a crossbow. But here's the thing that I would do. When I'm hunting in the morning, for a morning hunt, I love my tree stand. I hunt until, you know, whatever time I end my hunt that day. But I always carried a field point with me, as well as my broadheads. And before I got down for my hunt, I'd put my field point in, and I'd pick a spot, a leaf, a limb, something on the ground, and usually something out to push my distance. And I draw back, and I line up, and I take my shot. So at this point, I'm totally calm because I've been sitting all day, rested. There's no deer, there's no stress on my body here, you know, and I'll pick a spot and I'll take that shot. So when I'm talking like 35, 40 yards now. And I'm gonna tell you, you'd be surprised at how many times I take that shot and that arrow gets deflected by a little twig, a little vine, or a little something that I cannot see between me and that point I was aiming at. When you're in a wooded situation, I'm not talking about fields, I'm not really talking about fields, I'm talking about when you're hunting in the woods. They're just stuff you can't see. Once you get beyond like 35, 40 yards, that your eyes can't see these little twigs, and that's enough to deflect an arrow. especially if it catches the edge of a broadhead or even a mechanical broadhead, you know. It could really wreak havoc on it and just throw it off enough to make you wound the game or miss the game. That's happened time and time again. So that's what I want to tell you is you're in that wooded environment and you see something out at 60 yards, just because you got a crossbow and you're down the range doesn't mean it's necessarily the best idea to shoot at 60 yards. So I'm going to tell you where I'm at, guys. With a crossbow, I will probably never take a shot beyond 40 yards in the woods. Probably never. There's too much drop, too much stuff I can't see between that and the deer, especially that first half-hour daylight and that last half-hour daylight. Your vision's not as good. Your scope's a little bit darker, what you're seeing through there on that crossbow, and I'm telling you, there's stuff that you're not going to see. It's not worth taking that shot and winning that animal. And you say, well, yeah, what if it's a big buck? I should take it anyway. I'm going to tell you guys, I practice what I preach. Biggest buck I ever saw in the wild in my life, I didn't shoot. He was 30 yards from me. But when he was at 30 yards, he was looking straight at me. He was a 17 point. I know it because he's been captured on camera several times on his farm that I was hunting. He scored about 170 is what everybody was guessing. He had drop tines, he had everything, and he's down there on the ground, and he's looking right at me, and I haven't even drawn my bow yet. He's looking right at me. And the reason he's looking at me because I saw him come up the trail. He went out of my sight, and it seemed like forever. I felt he went the other way. I decided to grunt. What he did is he came right out of my sight, and he stopped there, and I couldn't see him, and he waited there forever. I don't know what he was waiting for, if he sent something, I don't know. But I'm like, I got worried he was going to get away. I let a little grunt out. He took 2 jumps, landed 30 yards at me, looked right up at me, and stared me down. I couldn't move. And all of a sudden, he took 2 hops. And I figured that put him about 37 yards at an extreme angle going away. And he just sauntered off. And I could have drew and shot, but I didn't because I'm not comfortable with 37 yards. I couldn't see the stuff on the edge of where he was at. I definitely didn't want to wound a buck of that class. I want to live another day. I either want to make a clean shot, clean kill, or not. So I'm just saying, guys, that's something to think about. I'm going to tell you this now. The longest shot I've ever taken with a compound bow or crossbow at a deer has been 30 yards. That's my max I've ever shot, and I've been doing this for 30-something years. So the key to the crossbow is hunt like a compound bow, okay? When you're in the woods, you set up tight on shots, you get up close and personal, practice those 60 and 70, sure, because that makes you a better marksman, better trigger control, everything else, because you can hit that on the range. That 30-yard shot in the woods is no problem, but there's too many different factors. So to answer the questions, can you shoot? Absolutely, you can shoot out that far to 100 yards if you want to. Do it on the range, do it in a controlled environment. In the woods, my recommendation is I wouldn't go beyond 35, 40 yards. That's what my limits are. Yours may be different. I've kind of laid some things out that you got to know the distance for sure. And the further out you go, any variance, deer's walking at an angle, anything, 2 yards can make a huge difference when you get out that 60, 70, 80 yards. Huge difference, as I showed you with the ballistic drop. Again, you guys make your own call. My key, this whole thing is you need to do what you're comfortable with, what you're confident with. And I'm just going to tell you, like, the people that can do those 70-yard shots and do it well, consistently, trigger control with a crossbow, that's probably your top 1% of the people. That's the reality of it. Most people don't practice enough. They like rifles. A lot of people pull out the rifle week before hunting season, shoot it a couple of times, yeah, it's on, they go hunting. You know, and, you know, I do the same when I'm hunting my rifle because I don't make those far shots. But if I'm shooting out far, those guys practice and practice and practice. And most people don't put that kind of practice into shooting those longer shots anyway. So know your limits. That's what I want to stress. Know your limits. You'll be much happier because there's nothing like that feeling in your gut when you wounded an animal and you can't recover it. It's awful. You don't want to do that, dude. Make a clean kill, get the job done, limit your shots to what you're comfortable with, and that's where you need to be shooting. So my recommendation, especially if you're starting out, is really limit yourself to 40 yards or under in a wooded environment. If you're out in the field and you know it's dead on 50 and it's feeding in an ag field or something like that and it's broadside or just slightly quartering away and you feel good about it, the animal's totally calm, you're watching the ears, you're watching the body language, and you want to take a 50-yard shot, hey, maybe if you're good at it, if you practice and you're good at it and you don't have external forces messing you up, maybe. But in the wooded environment, I mean, 35, 40 yards, I mean, that's really the max. And really, like I said, I want to set up at 20 because I want to know for sure. I want to have complete confidence when I pull that trigger that animal's going down. So that's my thoughts on it, guys. So if you would, hit that like and subscribe. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you next time.